Good morning. It's like 9 o'clock, so I guess we'll get started. Gary's not here today, so no singing. Sorry, guys. But I'm here to introduce Kara Clark Summers. As you all know, she's the MACA president, and she is here to, what are you doing, Kara? She's going to talk about the MACA conference coming up and introduce Kathy. And here you go, Kara.
Thank you very much. So this has been a great conference. I think it's a beautiful location and all that they've done, and Betty and Ben and the board and the staff, and everybody's been gracious, and this is just beautiful, and I think we should all give them a round of applause for that. Thank you. I was talking to some of you last night, and it was just all the work that you've done. Nobody knows what goes on behind the scenes. So thank you very much. We've had a great week, very good week. So I just want to talk a little bit about the September annual conference. So somebody said earlier, where is that again? And I'm like, actually, it's in St. Louis, but it's going to be in West County, so at the Sheraton Westport Lakeside Chalet. And I sent the room reservations out last week in an email. So if you did not get the room reservation booking, I will be sending that out again just to make sure. Please go ahead if you have time and book your hotel, because we don't want them to come in and book another conference because we aren't getting enough rooms. So if you haven't done that already, please do that. I also sent out in the email just a tentative agenda so you kind of have a timeline of when you needed to be there. We'll have committee meetings beginning on Tuesday with a welcome and vendor reception Tuesday evening. And then we'll begin our general session on Wednesday morning. So I did send that out to you all, so just make sure if you have any questions about the conference. I'm trying to gather speakers now and get all of that lined out, but if you have any questions or concerns or ideas for speakers or anything you want to hear about, please contact me. Also, I wanted to introduce, some of you may not have met our new executive director, Kathy Holstein. So we're glad to have her, and if you have any questions, you want to reach out to her. She's been great. She's been doing our newsletter and a lot of other things, but make sure you're reading that, and she's going to just talk a little bit about that.
Oh, you want to go this way? Thank you, Kara. So yes, I'm Kathy, and I've met the vast majority of you, but there's some that I don't know. A few of you have been making phone calls to me, and I had the opportunity to finally meet you face to face here at the conference, which was really nice. So I really appreciate that. We do want to just mention about the newsletter, but also other emails that are coming from us. So Kara and I are trying, I send it and then she's often forwarding it, so you may be seeing things more than once, but we want to be sure that things coming from me are not going to your spam or ending up in your junk or somewhere lost. So you might want to check for those. I included the hotel reservation link also in the most recent newsletter, and we're trying to at least get a newsletter out once a month. Sometimes you may see them twice a month, particularly during the legislative session when things are moving a little more quickly. And I'm doing some feature things. So one past was on Clinton Jenkins from Miller County, also highlighting the podcast that Eric and Brianna work on. This past one has a little feature story about Peggy McGaw, who's going to be up here to speak again in a little bit. But trying to help build the consensus amongst our membership of who we are, because I am a former county clerk and so was a member of this organization before taking this role, and I've been working on the vendor side for a few years in between, so I have a perspective kind of from both in the organization and as a partner with the organization. But I think it's really important to know that though we might be more than 100 plus members strong, it really is a family. And you will find that most of us are connected in some other way and enjoy seeing one another and spending time with one another. So I'm hoping to highlight some of the neat things about the members in our group so that we get to know each other more and become more bonded as a group as we go through time. And I think that'll help us, even when we don't agree, just like a family at Thanksgiving. We might have to agree to not talk about politics sometimes, but at the same time, we want to be really sure that we still function as a family and we can still all come together and find that common ground as we move forward as an association. So I am very open to feedback, critical feedback, positive feedback. Let me know what you want to see. And many of you know we're working on these Zoom trainings and some mini training sessions, really trying to put a focus on that. And I'm open to any suggestions on topics, and the Training Mentoring Committee has been wonderful to jump in and find resources. So please reach out and contact me. My cell phone and my email address are on everything we've been sending you. So if you don't have it, grab me and I'll be sure that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. She is a great resource, so please reach out to her or any of the executive board or the regional chairs. So they've been very active this year, and we can't thank them enough for putting on those regional meetings. I think, and everybody participating, they've been very good. So thank you all for doing that. It's my pleasure today to introduce our legislative committee, and also our association lobbyist is here today to speak to us too. So we are very fortunate that we have such a great elections committee chaired by our representative Peggy McGaw. And if you haven't had an opportunity to attend some of the hearings, I encourage you to do so, because it's very good when they hear from us locally. We do the job. You're doing the job, so they need to hear from you, and it's very important. And I think they appreciate that, and we appreciate them being responsive to us. But if you all want to come up today, our Representative Peggy McGaw, the chair of the Elections Committee, and then election committee members, Representative Donna Behringer, Adam Schwandren, Brad Banderman, Representative Banderman, and Chris Ropey, our association lobbyist. So we're thankful that they're here today. We appreciate them coming and all you do for us in Jeff City. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. If I haven't met you before, hopefully this week I got a chance to see everybody and renew lots of old friendships. I've said many, many times, you are my people, and it reflects when we have our elections committee meetings. I speak from the heart, but I also speak your language. And that's very important. It's been a, what's the word, Adam? It's been a year that's been a little disappointing in the fact that some of the things that happened early in the session set the tone for the things that would come later. And I take responsibility for some of that, not all of that. But the fact remains is that we have to work together, and the legislators have to hear from you, and they did. I'll let someone else take credit for a lot of the good things that happened, and I will take the fall for you on some of the things that you wanted to see passed, and they didn't get passed. But as always, there's always next year, and I pledge to you I will work even harder to make things happen in committee. Once it gets out of committee, it's sort of out of our hands, but you guys calling your reps and senators makes a huge difference. Coming on your legislative days made a huge difference. Your presence in the Capitol has been noted, much more than before. So again, I appreciate all that. So as the elections chair, I'm just going to talk about my committee a little bit. I may have to use my notes here. To get to know some people more personally is important. So my first friend here, Representative Adam Schwandren, he is one of those people like Brianna that did a session yesterday about how to read statutes. This guy, I'm like thinking he sleeps with the statute book under his pillow at night, because he's one of those, and he'll come to me, well, now, Peggy, point dot what, I'm like, slow down, Adam. So he's invaluable during a committee hearing, because he's always got his, his little pad in front of him, and he's looking stuff up, and he's giving me the. So thank you, Adam, for being the guy that I, look at, and plus he will stall. He will stall for me. This was my first year, of course, being the chair, and it's like, okay, I got to do what? Everything's very formal, And if you all know me, I'm pretty informal, but there are certain hoops you have to jump through to make it legal. So Adam is one of those people I really rely on. Now, Miss Donna Behringer, I tell you what, if you need to know something about numbers or stats, especially about the city of St. Louis, this girl has it. And you know, you rule county clerks like I was, I'm like, that makes no, that does not affect my life. It does. As you saw with some of the presentations we've had throughout the week, St. Louis sets the tone in some ways for the rest of the state because just through sheer numbers. We can't single out the third-class counties even though we outnumber as far as how many counties are third class. But we rely on someone like Donna, and especially on Elections Committee. Donna gives us that view of the city, and she calls it mine, and this is my area, which we need someone. We have to have a diverse group, and I'm very, very thankful that Donna's on that group. Representative Banderman, he came to us as a freshman, as you know, wet behind the ears. But the great, great thing about Representative Banderman is he has in his pocket, and it's a good thing, I'm not talking it's a bad thing, his county clerk, who we all love, Tim from Franklin County. And I could just see his mind, going through the questions or, thinking, what would Tim do? If I asked him, what's he going to guide me toward? And so never be afraid if you watch the committee meetings, I know you have a lot of things to do, and for the most part, they're usually boring. Not this year, right, Adam? You can text us real time. If some question, and it's absolutely going to make you have to, start over, text us, text Brad, text Adam, text me. Well, I'm supposed to be running the meeting. It might not be such a great idea, but get it to us soon enough. Get it to our staffs. We can, I don't know. I think we do a good job of staying in tune with what you guys need. And that's my goal in being the chair. So, and then the last guy down here, this guy, this absolutely is your most valuable asset in the Capitol, Mr. Chris Ropey. Because he has his whole thumbs and arms and legs into what is happening, especially in the Senate, which we representatives have to stay on our side and get our work done before it gets to the Senate. So there were many, many times that Mr. Chris Ropey was much more confident on how things were going to end up than I was, and I admit that. And there were a couple of times I would look at him and say, I don't think that's going to work. But he was confident, and guess what? It worked. So thank you, Chris, for being the, the person of the confidence and the procedures that I need as sort of a newbie to the committee process as a chair for sure. So you guys, I feel like your organization now is in one of the strongest positions it could be at this time, and you need to continue being cohesive like that because it makes a difference. Yeah, you didn't get bills passed for yourselves this year, but you tell me in unison, what did you get? So stay on alert because there are still, the parties think they still need that way to do it. So be vigilant of what you hear, but hopefully Mr. Confidence over there will know where we are on that. Because at first, when it didn't work out the way that the bill handlers wanted it, there was a rumor going around that the governor was going to, have a special session just for that. I didn't believe it when I heard it, and I still don't believe it. It's still going around, but I don't believe that the governor will call us in for a special session that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to reverse that particular bill. So, with that being said, I would like to, you're saying yes, you're agreeing, or Chris Ropey? Do you agree that you don't think the governor will call a special session to overturn that bill? Very confident, yay! Uh-oh. Okay. No guarantees, but 8 million, 8 million. No, I'm not talking about an election. I'm talking about calling us in to reverse the bill. See how she speaks up? She's a good gal. All right, I'm going to let Adam speak and tell about his experience and what he hopes to do. You know, with term limits, I'm considered a second-year junior, so I get to run one more time. I hope to be the chair of elections the entire time, which may be a 3-year chair, which is pretty, I mean, I'm really excited about it. So I got to keep towing the mark and not screwing up, getting called in the speaker's office. Did that twice. And continue to serve for you all. But I'm hoping that some of these faces here will be able to also continue to serve you in the future. So Adam?
Yes, I am Adam Schwadron from District 105 in St. Charles. So I see my St. Charles delegation over there. Woo. As Peggy said, I am not the vice chair. I did ask to be vice chair, but unfortunately I was not granted that. That went to Dan Stacy, who is a senior. So Lord willing, I get reelected next year. I will once again ask to be the vice chair of elections. I'm one of those weird people that I never really worked in elections like you all do. I did used to work for election administrators way back in the early 2000s. I believe they're now part of No Inc. Selling the Palm Pilots for just voter lookup across the country. And before that, I was an intern with the Associated Students of the University of Missouri back in 2003. And my assigned topic was elections, and that really right there is what got me involved with elections, and especially Chapter 115. So as Peggy said, I do work well with her, and I just want to reiterate, like I said 2 years ago when the meeting was back at the Ameristar, back in my district, I said, we don't know what we don't know from you, so please reach out to us, contact us, come to the hearings if you're able to. Because if we don't hear from you, we don't know what you want, unless it is Chris that's speaking on your behalf. But if he doesn't get to us, then we don't know what you want. And I was part of the team that was fighting very hard to make sure that our presidential preference primary was dead. So I believe that's one thing that you and the Secretary of State actually did agree on a lot of the times. Because he was giving me some things to try and help kill it, and I was happy to do it because one of the first bills that I sponsored my first year, 3 years ago, was to remove the presidential preference primary. And so in talking with the 2 House sponsors on that bill, they're like, what can we do to bring this back? I'm like, with me, nothing. I sponsored the bill. It's like you're spitting in my face here, so why would I work with you? And they moved along, and I was working hard behind the scenes against them, and we were successful, so yay. My pleasure.
Hi, I'm Donna Behringer, and I represent the 82nd District, which is all in the city of St. Louis, and I wish I had downtown, but I don't. I have an area many of you may know of, which is called The Hill, and if you want good Italian food, now good sushi, just so you know, you need to go to The Hill. So I am a senior, so this will be my 3rd term on elections, correct? And I asked to be on elections for the main reason is because I was tired of hearing how the elections in the city of St. Louis were rigged, or they cheated, or they did this and that, because I knew that was not true. And so I am a huge data person. That's why I yelled at 8 million, because I sit on fiscal review, and any bill in the state of Missouri that has a fiscal note of over 250,000 up or down has to come through fiscal review before it gets a 3rd read on that floor. So I've actually been able to push bills back to committee because I've proven the fiscal note is wrong, or we can't afford it, and it has to go back. So yeah, I am a nerd, and that's why on the night of elections, I sit down and I go through the tally, and I add up and I add up and I add up, and I will let everybody I know, I'll send them a congratulations or I'm so sorry. But I tell people, I said, elections matter and going to the polls matter. I said, because what you'll see is things, but look for what you don't see. And the perfect example is this last election where they put pot on the ballot. And I said, I went straight to what would be the most important seat, which I think was the senator's race. And then I went to how many people showed up just to vote on the recreational marijuana. And there were a lot of people that only voted on one thing on that ballot, one thing. And so people always say to me, well, why do you know that stuff? I said, because that tells me that those people aren't going to show up again at the next election because all they cared about was the marijuana. So I can tell you I'm not shy, and that there was a couple times this session that my husband texted me and said, your mic is hot. And I said, no, it's not. And he goes, then be quiet. So anyway, so if you've ever listened to the hearings, I can be kind of entertaining. So that's my thing. Thank you.
My name's Brad Bannerman. I am the representative for the central part of Franklin County, and Tim Baker is my county clerk and a friend of mine for a while. I just want to start by saying I think a normal person. I think most of us are when we get in. I've seen the process harden some people, just the frustration with the job, the slow course that takes place inside of the Capitol. But I want to encourage you guys in the room today. There are a lot of good people up there for the right reasons, and it has been a real eye-opener in several areas as I've gotten into the legislation. Obviously, it moves slow, but there really are a lot of really good people up there. You just don't know what to expect when you get elected. I've never ran for office before. I resisted it locally. I'm a student pastor by trade. I really didn't want somebody not coming to visit our church because of a decision that simply has to be made. Sometimes it's not popular. I felt like with the state representative, I was a little withdrawn from just the intimate decisions within our particular town. And so I got into it. And when I asked for my committee assignments, I tried to find areas that I knew I had personal friends in those areas that I could rely upon. I think it's a huge mistake as an elected official to get in and start tinkering around in areas that we simply don't have any knowledge of. And so I asked for some committees that I have personal friends on, and I felt like would affect literally almost every person within District 119. Elections obviously is something that affects us all, utilities, public safety, and I have what I call kings in the corner. That's what I've nicknamed them in my life. Tim is mine on elections, and I have relied on him heavily. I tell people in the education world, if you want to influence me as your representative, you're going to have to contact your school board, because that's who I'm paying attention to. And if you want to influence me on elections, you're going to have to go talk to Tim Baker, because I'm sending him what I'm dealing with. I'm at least going to get his opinion. We've agreed on most things so far. A few things we've got some minutiae in, but Tim knows the work, and I'm very thankful that he has been able to help guide me in this early year. Also, Chairman McGaugh has been extremely kind to me. Just the opportunity to come down and be with you guys today, last evening, has been an honor, and I think she has properly described us three. I'm really a nobody with very little information, and I'm really not good at much of anything except making people feel better after they leave me and learning. I enjoy the process, but it has been a real honor to serve with Representative Behringer and Squadron so far, and she was right about the numbers. You just saw that almost in every committee meeting, and I've been in Adam's room several times this year talking about things that are important to him. And of course, you have a tremendous representative for a chairman, somebody that's been in your work. I think that's important. It's certainly valuable. And you have a good advocate. I'll leave it at that with Chairman McGaugh. And she's a great person, and you guys know that. A wonderful, wonderful person. My name's Brad Bannerman. If I can be of any assist to you, you can get a hold of my office, obviously, find out my website and things like that. But I'm just honored to be a part of the learning process of you guys' world. And thank you for what you do. I believe our state has got a lot of things right in elections. I believe our state is doing a lot of things right. And transparency and fairness at the election, honesty, and a legal election. I believe we're doing that in the state of Missouri, and I look forward trying to find ways through you guys that we might be able to improve your way of life. Certainly, hand counting ballots is not my favorite thing from our party. Good God. Maybe when we had 100,000 people in our state, that would have been feasible. It's simply not feasible. There's no reason for it. But there's Antonin Scalia, one of my favorite Supreme Court judges of all time, said, I don't attack people, I attack ideas. And some really good people sometimes have some really bad ideas. And that's just the truth of it. There is some process involved with you guys in the legislature, and I want to encourage you to engage with us. We need your perspective and your information, and I welcome it in this process of learning how to be a good representative for my district and sit on this very important committee within our state.
Good morning, everybody. I know a lot of you out there, and again, Chris Ropey. I am one of your lobbyists in Jeff City. I'm with a lobbying firm of Barget and Associates, and I truly mean this. We are very honored and blessed. We have a lot of great clients that we get the privilege to represent, and that includes you all. The work that you're doing is so important, and I'm very glad to be able to be my little part of that in what happens at the Capitol and trying to carry out your priorities and represent you up in the building. And on behalf of the 5 other lobbyists in our firm who were all running around, eyes and ears everywhere, we're thrilled to be able to count you as a client. I think I'll try to go pretty quickly through this so we can take questions and whatever, but I know there's a lot of new clerks here today. Just kind of how the process works with you as an association, and how it works with your executive committee, and then what gets relayed to us as your eyes and ears every day in the Capitol, because all 4 of these individuals will tell you we're a citizen legislature. And what they all said is it's so important that they hear from the experts on elections, and then for other parts of county government that you're responsible for, and they've got to hear from you to be able to do a good job of setting the policy for the state of Missouri. You set your priorities. I don't if you do it at the next conference or whenever you adopt your resolutions and you go through that process. Then the executive committee says, hey, here's what we want to work on this year. We figure out what we want to have filed as legislation, or in the case of the presidential preference primary, what you want to oppose, and that's what we get to work on right away up in the Capitol. What we do is send weekly reports to the executive committee. Kind of here's what happened overall on just the broader scope of things that's going on in the building, and then our specific details about bills that were heard in committee or other things that are going on that will affect your job, to make sure that information gets out to the executive committee, and then that gets dispersed with the rest of the membership. It doesn't stop there. As you get further into session, it becomes busier and busier, where it's probably multiple texts each day, or phone calls, or 11:30 at night, conference calls real quick with Kara and others, because things move very fast, especially when you get to the end of session. So there's just a lot of communication going back and forth, and try to carry out those priorities on your behalf. I think if you look at I've been doing this since 2002 in Missouri politics. I was a Senate staffer before I got into the private side of things to get into the lobbying world. And you look at typically, and I haven't done an account, but I think you all would agree, it seems the most legislation gets filed on healthcare and education issues. Those seem to be the 2 most popular issues that get brought up, and there are bills filed to deal with those. I feel like the past couple years, election-related issues is probably 3rd. There has been a ton of attention lately, and everybody kind of knows why, and you're the front line, you deal with it, so you understand kind of how we probably got to this place and what you're seeing. But there's a fire hose coming at you with election issues in Jeff City. Thankfully, a lot of the more challenging bills that don't make a lot of sense, but it seems to make good politics, kind of goes forward and try to do everything we can to stop those bad bills at your request and your direction from happening. So I think a couple of bills that were out there, and there were, like I said, there was a ton, but just a few to mention. One of their colleagues, Representative, and he's a freshman, Olerking, am I saying that right? So he filed a bill this year that would have gotten rid of the mandatory training. I think there's one mandatory training for clerks. And, you know, this is just an example of what we do and at your direction, how we deal with some of these issues. So he filed this bill to get rid of this mandatory training, working with the, you know, you did not have a resolution that you passed saying we want to keep the mandatory training because it's probably good if we want safe and secure elections to have people who know how to do that job, and being trained is obviously going to go a long way to making sure that that happens. So this bill's filed. We send you all the bills that get filed we think you might care about and get direction on how to deal with that. House Bill 1307, the executive committee clearly said that's probably a bad thing. We don't want that bill to pass and become law. It's good to have that training and to keep that in place. And went to the representative who filed the bill, communicated, here are the issues and why, just to be transparent and upfront with you, here's why we are opposed to this bill, you know, what's the impetus for it, and didn't get a lot of the background on why or who asked him to file it, but I think it eventually got referred to the chairman's committee, and this is the beauty of having somebody who understands your issues as the chair. She never had a hearing on it, so it never went anywhere beyond that. So that's a good thing. But you always have to be worried it could be put forward as an amendment on other bills that are election related. And thankfully that didn't happen. I think he listened to us. We'll see if he files the bill next year and we have to deal with it again. But that's where, you know, hopefully his local election folks have communicated and will continue to communicate with him their opposition to that bill. So that, as an example of how you deal with an issue that comes up in front of the legislature. I know a lot of you are interested in with your commissioners and folks dealing with Senate Bill 190, which was the essentially, I'll just call it the senior citizen property tax freeze. It has a Social Security income tax issue with it as well. The governor has till July 14th to decide whether he wants to sign that bill. He can veto the bill, he can put it in his desk, and it'll go into effect in that case. I honestly don't know what he will do and what his decision will be on that legislation, but I know a lot of you're talking about it, and in your courthouses you're talking about it. But just that's kind of an update on where that bill is, because I know you're all watching that. I was telling some other folks earlier, and I would be very interested in their perspective. This is my observation of how that ended up passing. Was we see this a lot. The Senate or the House will pass a bill, and everyone kind of knows, well, the other side is going to make changes to it. It's, you know, this isn't the final version. The Senate sent that bill over, and the House took it up and passed it. I think everybody thought, you know, it'll become a big tax bill, and then we'll eventually go to a conference committee on it, and then they'll work out the differences, and you'll have a final package that probably has consensus or is a part of a broader deal, so to speak, on a whole host of issues. And the House just took it up and passed it, and all of a sudden it was across the finish line, and now it's at the governor's desk. I'm not an expert on that bill. I know I've heard people talk about, oh, we need to fix a few things with it, and that always gets very interesting in trying to go fix something the next year. And if we could just, you know, the process to get it right the first time doesn't always happen. But that's where that bill is. One of the last things I want to say is the way the legislative process works. And a lot of legislators, you're either good at passing bills, you can be good at killing bills, but it is very, very, very difficult, nearly impossible to be good at both. And that applies with associations. And if you want to pass something, you want to try to kill something, you're probably not going to be able to do both. And you look at what your priorities were and what was in Representative McGall's legislation from this year. Senator Crawford filed the identical bill over in the Senate. which was, I call some cleanup policies and some things that didn't make it in the huge omnibus bill last session that passed. But it had the shortening, I guess the lengthening of the electioneering distance in it, the election official harassment language in it, making the permanent absentee list confidential, making provisional ballots, allowing for provisional ballots during the 2-week absentee period, and then there was some language on local filing dates that we've been going back and forth with for, it feels like 5 years now, that I think everybody kind of got on board with. Had great committee hearings, kind of figured out what was going to work and what wasn't going to work. There's a lot of issues across the board from legislators on the electioneering piece. Everybody kind of saw that was going to have issues on lengthening that distance, and so we kind of moved off of that to try to save the rest of the bill and the other 4 provisions that were in there. Representative McGall successfully amended a lot of those onto various bills, but as the bottleneck of the session went and got to the end, we got to a place where you had the presidential preference primary. If that was going to pass, we had a great shot of getting those 4 pieces attached to it, and it could have passed as a package. But with the direction of the association and the executive committee, it was more important to you all to stop the presidential preference primary from being forced on you than to pass those, what I call those cleanup provisions. So that's the decision that was made, and we can get into the sausage making, and it would take way too long to talk about all the things that went into the presidential preference primary not making it across the finish line. But the biggest takeaway from that is it was because of you all in reaching out to your members, reaching out to your senators, having 8 or 9 of them get up on the Senate floor in the last 3 days of session and talking about all of the problems with that policy, why it didn't make sense, the cost, et cetera, and all the different arguments. And everybody had a little different take on it depending on where they were from in the state of Missouri. But that's because of your outreach, why that happened. Your regional weeks, when you come to Jeff City and do that, is tremendous. Please keep doing that. When you show up for committee hearings, like they said, your presence is felt in the building. That needs to continue to happen. So I hope you will still do that going forward. And it's, at the end of the day, session ended, and I think there was no harm done for the most part in a lot of the issues that you care about. And we'll see a lot of them come back next year, and we'll go at it again. And I'll be happy to turn this back over to these guys. They're the experts of what happens in the building and answer any questions or talk about anything else.
So I think you see, many of you say, how do you do it, Peggy? Oh my gosh, the stress must be tremendous. But when you've got people beside you, like these people to my right, it makes it easier to, get up each morning and try again. So last year, it was either at this meeting or at the clerk's conference, I said, hey, throw me some ideas for bills that you want that are non-election. Come on, clerks, think about what you want non-election. Then I remember I was heady over after the success of the financial statement bill. And I hope that's gone well for you all because, people didn't understand that situation either. And so we got that done. It took a couple of years, and again, thanks, Chris. So this year, coincidentally, I got a call from Liz Ziegler from, is that how you pronounce her name, Ziegler? From the Missouri Ethics Commission, and she would like for me to file some cleanup about the PFD situation. I guess, and I didn't realize this till she told me, that there were 36 candidates that were stricken from your ballots because they hadn't properly filled out that document. And she and they are not blaming you all. They're not blaming the clerks because they get the information from you and this list of candidates, but by that time that they get it from you, when the polysubs, the political subdivisions give them to you, it's too late for some of those deadlines, the 14-day, you know what I'm talking about, the 14-day. So they want me, I hadn't had time to talk to Chris and have him help me with this, but we will. They're going to send me language, and then I'll get it to research, and we'll get it. But what they want to do is make it more aggressive toward the political subdivisions. So those clerks that are taking the filings for the cities and the schools and the fires and the waters, you know, that they realize that they have to get that list in to the Ethics Commission so that these candidates have a fighting chance of not being removed from the ballot. So again, when you see that coming through, or you wonder, what the heck's Peggy doing? It's because I'm trying to help the Ethics Commission, which is a good group to stay in good with, right? And we will make sure that no one is blaming you all on not doing their job. And it's maybe, you know, I don't know what's happening in your area, but it seems like all over the world in Missouri, these little sub-districts can't keep help. They don't pay good. You know, they run their office out of their, you know, kitchen table, such like township clerks. And you don't want to penalize them with a monetary type of, you know, you are gonna get charged, but having a statute to point to and say, you know, you've got to get this done, you've got to turn this list in, you've got to do this by certain date once you take your filings, will help the Ethics Commission. So that's probably one of the bills I'll file right off. But again, between now and then, I would like for you all to be thinking about non-election bills, something that you think would help your offices, and I'm happy to talk about it at Kara's conference, or again, email me, call me, whatever you want to do, and we'll try to get some things, and we'll bring Chris into that as well. I think that there were so many times that I thought to myself, if I weren't down here, how would this have turned out? And I don't give myself any credit for the things, the good or bad, because at this point you are so dependent on those other people that are sitting in the seats in front of you and beside you that have never run an election, have never even thought about politics until they got into that arena. They come from different backgrounds. You know, we have got lots of state patrol, we've got lots of teachers, we've got lots of pastors, lawyers. See, I didn't say that one because my son was an attorney, you know. Anyway, so they come from different backgrounds, and a lot of times, you know, like Representative Vanderman said, you know, they need to just maybe have a tidbit of information. That's where the relationships come in. We don't necessarily bond with each other like this so much anymore because, you know, these dang lobbyists can't take us out to eat or anything anymore because of the ethics laws. So there are people sometimes that you don't have a relationship with, though. You have to go to them. I had a little mixer and had the elections committee into my office so that I could meet them and see what their, you know, goals for the year were, and that helps. So as you go along, if you think your representative needs some guidance, send them my way. We'll bond and we'll talk, and you know, my door's always open, and I actually have a place where people can sit comfortably now. So just send them my way. It's always good to get to know your fellow representatives, and that's on both sides of the aisle, because Donna and I, we have a good time. I'll just tell you that. She's a great advocate for her party as well. You know, and we don't cuss and discuss party. We just talk about the difference between St. Louis City and Carrollton, Missouri. You know, there's a vast difference, and so that's why we're good friends. So I think our time is up, but I do want to be able to open this up for a couple of questions, mostly for Chris, or suggestions. Now be kind, Kim. No. Yeah. Yeah. Inside joke. No, but you know, you can reach us at any time. But if anybody has a question, you have a question? Oh, there you are. Yes, sir. Steve Korsman. Good question. So actually, I thought Mac was working on some type of, because, okay, all right, I thought so. Salary task force. Because I know Steve Hobbs has been in my office a couple of times, and some of the people on that task force, and so they're gathering information, right, Suzette? Weren't you and Bettina on something like that? Okay. That's correct. All right. So always, yeah. The clerks always get, balled up with the assessors and the collectors and treasurers and say, well, y'all do the same work, right? Yeah. Boo. So again, same thing like the presidential preference primary. Advocate for yourself. You are the only people and persons that can actually show and do. I really like that. I think Shane might have done that, the list of, your duties on two sides of that little handout. Continue to do that. Make sure that Mac has those. You all may have made them. I don't know who made them. Anyway, it's good. Continue to add to it.
Can I make just a comment
absolutely.
about that? So your executive committee for the past several years, I mean, that issue has come up as there's new bills introduced that would mandate new responsibilities for your offices. So, I mean, we've had that conversation, and if anybody has any brilliant ideas about a funding source that makes sense to tie it to, I think just be thinking about that, because I do think there's always potentially a path forward to address that issue. I just think it's always easier if you can say, hey, here's how to get there, and here's where it can come from. So it's not, GR's responsibility or the state's responsibility, these folks' responsibility, but coming up with how to do it in a way that makes somewhat sense. I think you get a pretty receptive audience, especially like you said, you look at some of the other county office holders and what they've done the past several years, you look at the sheriffs and et cetera, et cetera. Identifying a way to do it that makes sense will go a long way, and is something you should work on and figure out how to try to get that addressed and move forward with something.
And honestly, I wasn't trying to pass the buck, by saying, oh, Mac's doing that. But we all know the importance of the relationship that Mac has with the affiliates. And I think more so that you have to let the others know that you're attempting this, or include them, or they'll fight you. They'll come in and say, okay, those clerks don't need that, so vote no, So it needs to be a cohesive group, that there's some agreement on the schedules, in my opinion. You agree with that, Chris? Any other questions before they throw us off? Yes, sir. Hello. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's right. Yeah. And you guys, for the most part, the third class especially, are the budget officer, and you see the numbers. You think your sheriff cares? See why I get in trouble all the time? Your sheriff didn't take the raise? Oh, so Missy says the DeKalb County sheriff didn't take the raise, and now his association is, calling him out, right? Yes? Can you hear you?
So every association has a member on the MAC salary task force, and I volunteered to be the clerk member on it. I don't know how wise of a decision that was, but that's what I did. And then Bettina at the time we started it was the MAC president, and Suzette was the past president. So we have 3 members on this, and everybody else has 1, basically. And when you're on a Zoom call or having a meeting with, some of them have been in person, you know, we want to be respectful of one another and of every association. One of the primary goals was to not have an association go out on their own like the Sheriff Association did. Another one was to restructure the salary, especially set a new base, because there are some counties who do not give COLAs, and so the clerks and other officials are making very low salaries and maybe have been in office 12, 16 years and have had 1 or 2 raises in all that amount of time, which we all know what the cost of living has done. So we've met for I don't know, less than a year, but close to a year, and multiple times. And it's really kind of complicated and a lot to think about. So we do it right, and will we do it perfectly? Probably not. But we are working towards some goals, and decided we weren't getting enough done for this past legislative session. We didn't want to rush into something and then it have all kinds of problems. So that's why we didn't get it done this year or introduce a bill yet. We need to make sure we have something really good in place, because if we do and they pass it, it will probably be around a long time. So we do have a lot of goals, and everybody in this room knows the workload in the clerk's office compared to most of the other county offices, but to convince other people of that is not easy. So one thing I will say, they're not receptive to tying it, from what we know, the legislators they've spoken with, they don't want us tying it to the judges. And I actually didn't think we needed to do that myself either, but we are going to set a new base, hopefully, and it also has a lot of local control to address Missy's concern. If you are a county that can afford more, then your salary commission will vote for more. And if you are not you're a county that cannot afford more, this just adjusts the base a little bit, and it changes some of the incremental increases. Did I cover everything?
And just to give you guys a little bit of a time frame, our goal is to try to have something to present to the MAC board for feedback at the summer board meeting in August, and then that information would be pushed down into all of the affiliates for feedback so that we could do some consensus building. I'm sure our initial proposal won't be perfect right off the bat, so we'll have some adjusting to do. And then hopefully we would have something maybe ready to pre-file in December is kind of the overall goal here. So hopefully we'll be able to meet that.
Thank you, thank you. So that is a very good example of how you all work together, and what Sherry said about, you have to have confidence in what you're trying for, but you have to tread lightly with the other affiliates, and that's what MAC's all about. And so that's why that's a good avenue. And these ladies represent you well, and so that's also a good avenue for me to say, Sherry comes and testifies when she can on behalf of third-class counties. Always appreciate her coming down. Any of the rest of them, Eric Fay on the boards, and everybody else who comes and testifies, we really appreciate it. We need to hear from you, so please continue to do that. And if one of the freshmen, if you newbies think that you can't get up, you're never up like this in front of people. You're sitting in a chair with a desk, and you have your notes in front of you, and I'm the chair, and I'm a friendly face, so please come and do it. Donna wanted one more little thing here.
Well, first of all, I want to say I really enjoy coming here and knowing all the clerks. I very much appreciate you coming and testifying, because you can always come and testify for informational purposes only. So that means you're not taking a side, but at least we hear from you. The next thing I want to say is I can't thank my own election board enough, because I love texting, sorry, but when we are in committee and there are things that I don't quite grasp or I don't know how they'll impact, I start texting for answers because I want to know how does it impact the city. So I appreciate my election board, especially since I texted you to bring me more coffee. Thank you. And the very last thing I want to say is that we are very, very protective of Peggy. She has a whole group that is around her so that if we ever have a question on whether or not it's a good bill out on the floor, we go see Peggy. And if we're worried she's going to get sideways with somebody, we start gathering around her. So I cannot tell you all how lucky you are to have Peggy. That's it.
That was very sweet. But also, that's why I bragged up on Adam, because he can take them on. And he would do it. Yes, Eric. Yeah.
It is continually disheartening for all of us to see the electioneering distance get shot down every session.
I know.
And many representatives and senators stand up, and it almost sounds like they feel like if that distance got moved, they're going to lose the election.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to talk to any of their constituents. And I just want to try to one more time reemphasize, Missouri is such an outlier in this regard. Again, this April election in St. Louis County, we had to have the police at a number of polling places almost all day. It takes a tremendous amount of law enforcement resources to enforce this. And I was down in Texas, in Houston, this May for their municipal elections, and I talked to the administrators in Houston. It's not a deal in Texas because it's 100 feet. A plurality of states have 100 feet. And if you ever wanted to do something that would improve the voting experience, that would be it, is to take this circus that happens in front of so many of our polling places and move it away.
We tried, I started with the 100. Yeah. I went down to 50. I knew they'd make me roll down. I went down to 50. And I thought, oh, they're going to go for that. 50's good. That's a compromise. There were so many of them waited to put an amendment on and all that stuff, which, by the way, talking about amendments, that's a whole nother thing. Chris kept texting me, put that amendment on this bill, on this bill, on this bill. So I got to where I didn't remember which bills it was on. What is so bad about asking for protection for your all's lives? These people that are voting against that type, you're out there running the election for them. They don't want you to get killed or intimidated. So I'm really going to put that all over next year. And I'm sure Adam and Brad will help me. And so will Donna. I think they're going to get the hook here in a second. So any further questions, you can catch us outside. Like I said, you text or call me. It's going to take me and Mary a few hours to get home. So if you want to call me on your way home, I'll take the call. I have hands free, by the way. No texting and driving. Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Adam, Brad, Chris. You guys, we're going to draw for some prizes here. So get your little white tickets out. All right, let me get the bowl. Shane, sorry, we're running a little late. Where's the bowl with the numbers? Uh-oh, wait a minute. We got to find the... Mark did. Now what? Okay, we're ready for you, Shane. Yeah, we're going to get the guy to bring back the bowl with the tickets. Here you go.
All right. This is the presentation. Everyone's like, I'm leaving. I understand. So anyway, well, good morning all. My name is Shane Scheller. I don't know if I've had a chance to meet everyone who is a new clerk or not, but I get the opportunity to serve as the county clerk down in Greene County. And how many of you are familiar with for those who are new clerks, not
clerks who served last year and the year before are familiar with cast vote record. Have you heard that term before if you're a new clerk? Well, it was a term I had not heard until the fall of 21. Matter of fact, I was here in St. Louis, and I was actually observing the St. Louis County Election Board election that November. And so I was hanging out with Eric that day and Rick Stream that day. And I want to say it was the day before or the day after, I can't recall specifically, but we had got a phone call, and a gentleman, some of you all know, named Keith Carmichael had sent an email request. Matter of fact, I just saw Keith this last week in Henry County, and he asked for the cast vote record. And I was like, not necessarily a term I'm familiar with, no one had requested before. And so we began to look at that time, and we determined then with our county council that it was a closed record. And so, of course, many of you know, after an election, and this had to do with the 2020 election results, all records are sealed for 22 months. So this kind of began a learning opportunity for a lot of us county clerks. So I'm going to go through what a cast vote record is, kind of give an overview of what we've been doing in Greene County and why we are where we're at today, because we're actually in a lawsuit over this. So, all of you who were county clerks in 2021, 2022 may recall last fall, we began to receive requests, and they were similar to what I have up here. And it would say, pursuant to our state's Freedom of Information Law, please remit the cast vote records, then it would insert your jurisdiction, Greene County, of course, from the 2020 general election. These records shall include the following fields as a minimum. And it would say CVR record number, timestamp, tabulator ID, municipality, precinct, batch ID, record ID, counting group, session type, ballot type ID, paper index, contest, candidate, undervotes, overvotes, mark density. Now, how many of you all understand that? Charlie does. Of course, he's in that background. Charlie's going through this. But as you know, when we conduct elections, we're conducting elections with the paper ballot. We're doing the pre-testing. We're doing the post-testing. We're doing the manual audits. We're doing everything we're supposed to. What a lot of us were not familiar with, because it's a report that had not been requested for, is the newer version of election technology software has what's called the cast vote record. Some people call it the cast ballot record, but either way, the goal of the cast vote record is that, and this is as I understand it, is that if there's an issue in the programming, those who are the programmers can print the cast vote record, comes out on an Excel file, and they can determine if there's a pattern in the information they're looking at on the spreadsheet through the Excel, determine where that error might be in the coding, in the programming. And so actually, when I went to do a little bit more research, what was interesting to me is that the folks that really campaigned hard or certainly lobbied hard for the cast vote record was the ranked choice folks. So think about it, ranked choice voting, it's going to get pretty complicated if you think about it in terms of tallying the record and everything. So if you have a cast vote record, you can take the information from the cast ballots. As the machine is tabulating those ballots, it will then take that information from it and put it into the spreadsheet so they can figure out where there might be an issue if there's a programming flaw. Well, as you know, the folks who were concerned that the 2020 election was not accurate, they began to request this record because they wanted to see if the vote count that we posted in 2020 was the same as the cast vote record. They would compare that to this. Now, as I mentioned, even for those who are new, you know, after the April election, when you sealed your documents from the 2020 election, unless a court tells you to open them, you have to keep them closed for 22 months. So when I got the request in the fall of 21, when we checked on it, they said, no, we do not believe this is a record that can be open. Of course, those who were requesting the records, as you may recall, one of these records to be sent to castrecords@frankspeech.com. And then thereafter, the information was to be uploaded to this website. And then apparently the website's designed to compile the cast vote records from every state that the CVR has been acquired. Now, I will tell you one of the things that has interested me in this request, because I have no problem providing information, is, as you know, a lot of the folks who have questions about the 2020 election, I think we would all agree, they do not trust the voting machines. Everyone agree with that? Well, the same programming that tabulates the ballot is the same programming that tabulates and puts out the cast vote record. And so my question has been, if we don't trust it to tabulate correctly, how do we know, if you don't trust that, that you would trust the cast vote record? But for some reason, they trust the cast vote record, but they don't trust the tabulation. And so that's kind of a little bit of an interesting question I've had in my mind ever since this came about. But they were polling, and so we went and looked at statute 115.493. And I know a lot of you had your county council do the same thing. And it says the election authority shall keep all voted ballots, ballot cards, processed ballot materials in electronic form and writing forms in all applications, statements, certificates, affidavits, and computer programs relating to each election, as I mentioned, for 22 months after the date of the election. Oh, man, I'm not clicking ahead, am I? Hang on a second here, guys. I'm going to catch you up to my screen here. So one problem. See if I can see it here. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay. That'll be my next screen. All right. So during that time, voted ballot cards, am I on the same screen now? Or need to go back? Okay. During the time that voted ballots, ballot cards, processed ballot materials in electronic form or written forms are kept by the election authority, it should not be open or inspected or allow anyone else to do so except upon order of a legislative body, trying election contest, or a court, or a grand jury. And let's move forward. Then after 22 months, the ballots, ballot cards, processed ballot materials in electronic form, written forms, applications, statements, certificates, affidavits, and computer programs relating to each election may be destroyed. So as we may recall, during the conference last year that we had down in Springfield, they had, as you may recall, Mike Lindell came to Springfield, and we were happy to host him there in Greene County. And during the conference, one of the things that they brought up was they wanted the people there to begin to request the cast vote record. So I remember I was trying to get ready for the conference because I was president last year, for those who are new, and we started getting a flurry of requests for these cast vote records. Now, what was interesting is last year I had the honor to be named the Sunshine Hero for being transparent in terms of providing information to the public. And so I don't have any problem providing information to the public. I have nothing to hide. I've told people this from day one. However, I got a couple of phone calls as we were getting this information, and two people that I respect said to me, we have concerns that if we release the cast vote record, it will compromise the secrecy of the ballot. And the reason why is the cast vote record, as we understand it, prints out in the order of how voters cast their ballot. So now you've got an issue, you've got tension here. You got the Sunshine Law, which I'm going to show you here in a second. It is, oh, did I go back? Okay, clicked ahead too fast. So there it says in chapter 6:10 that if there's a conflict, we can go before, at the expense of the public governmental body, in the circuit court of the county of the public government body's principal place of business, to ascertain the propriety of any such action or seek a formal opinion from the Attorney General, which that doesn't happen a whole lot anymore, so that wasn't a good path, or an attorney for the governmental body. So what we decided to do was we decided to go before our local circuit court and say, we have a request for the cast vote record. We have the Sunshine Law, which says we'll be transparent. We also know in Chapter 115, it is against the law for us to compromise the secrecy of the ballot. Would everyone agree with that? We always want to protect the secrets of the ballot. And I often tell people, I want everyone to know everything about an election except how you vote. We always want to protect that, right? And we take great lengths when we go through election judge training, even when it comes to our accessible voting equipment. What do we tell our election judges? If one person votes on the accessible voting equipment, what do? You have two or three more vote because you don't want people to know how they voted on that. So we had real tension, and so that's when we decided to go before our circuit judge. Matter of fact, I stayed in the Springfield Business Journal before we ever went to the circuit judge. This was back in September of last year. I said I firmly believe in and support election transparency in accordance with the Sunshine Law while balancing that with protecting the secrecy of how individual voters vote their ballot. To ensure that I'm being held accountable, I'm seeking accountability through a court ruling before proceeding to make a decision that potentially compromises the secrecy of voted ballots or prevents the transparency of the Sunshine Law was established to protect. And my point is, I often hear people get tired of people in elected office making decisions that personally benefit them, regardless of the law, especially when the law is silent. So it was important to me to say, I am not a decision-making body. I'm an administrator. I'm no longer in the legislature. I don't get to, as we had our legislative panel up here previously, I was there for 3 terms. We would pass laws. The governor would decide whether or not they would go into law if the governor decided to sign or veto them. But once when the law, those are laws that we all abide by. And so it's important to me that we follow them, but it's extremely important to me that I not do things that personally benefit me. Because to be honest, it would have been really easy just to provide the record. Because as you know, these folks have been very persistent. They've been very tenacious in terms of wanting to get this information. But none of us wants to do something that would compromise the integrity of our office. So, moving forward here, I'm going to give a little bit of technical definition. Technically speaking, a cast vote record is the electronic data that the election equipment pulls from the markings on the electronic ballot images. Now, if you've got the older version, and I think everyone now has the current version, most of the people in this audience, you probably have the more updated software programs that's able to pull the image. I know previous to this, we never would have been able to pull an electronic image because when our ballot was scanned, it was an optical scan. Now, as you know, it's a digital scan that actually pulls the image up for you. And so therefore, we can go through after every ballot is cast, and I really liked it. For example, what if something happened? We know, I don't know if Emily's here, but I think it was in Mississippi County years ago, the courthouse burned down before they could do a recount. Does anybody remember this? There was a contest that needed, yeah, you remember this? Yes, you were there. And there was a recount that needed to happen, and mysteriously the courthouse burned down before they could do the recount. Well, at least with this, you would have the electronic image, so even if the ballots got burned up, you should still have the electronic capture of it. So, moving forward, then using that raw data, an election authority has the ability to generate in the produce function a report. I'm going to let you know Madison does this. I'm not going to take credit for this, all right? She's our election coordinator. Commonly in a medium such as Excel that shows in a readable format the cast vote record. Then absent the generation report, the raw data is the images of voted paper ballots. Now again, no one, has anyone here produced a cast vote record after every election? Has anyone done that? And the reason why is you're only doing it if there was an issue with your program. And so if you were doing your pre-testing or your post-testing and you find there's an error, that's when the people that do the programming would say, I need the cast vote record. That was the real purpose of this. Then this general report can be filtered and organized through various fields. This includes the order in which the ballots were cast at a location, which may nullify the secrecy of a voter's ballot. So if you think about it, if you know the first 2 or 3 voters that voted, know the last 2 or 3 voters that voted, or how many people know folks that will tweet out, I was voter number 35 when they cast their ballot, right? Right then and there, you can take that report and go look and know how your neighbor voted. So you've got a lot of potential situations here. And we also know there's sometimes you have one ballot type for one voter in your precinct. That happens on occasion too. You have those unusual circumstances. So a lot of things can happen that can compromise the secrecy of the ballot. Now, what was interesting to me was when our county council went to begin to research this, this is the part that really captured my attention. Because I always thought that the primary purpose we kept the ballots for 22 months was if there was evidence of voter fraud. Is that what most people, if there was like a question, like the outcome was not correct, you kept those ballots for 22 months so you could go back and look at that. Actually, if you go back into our state law going back to the 1930s and think about that period of time, the primary purpose of RISMO 115.493 is not to preserve the secrecy of the ballots, is not to preserve the ballots as evidence, sorry, I misstated that, but to preserve the secrecy of the ballots during the 22 months during which these ballots are required to be in custody of the election authority. And that goes to State Miller versus O'Malley, decision made in 1938, And it said in there, the object is to preserve the secrecy of the ballot, not to avoid a mere crowding of the custodian's vault. Now, what was happening back during the 1930s during this period of time? Anybody remember? Tom Pendergast, exactly. And a lot of us have forgotten this, but if you think about that period of time, there were political bosses in Kansas City, and frankly, they were here in St. Louis as well, and they controlled who? The election judge teams. There was a lot of manipulation of the people that were counting the ballots. And so one of the things they wanted to do was to protect, because there was also coercion of voters during that period of time. And that's why, you may recall, it says in our state statute, you cannot stand up and announce how you voted inside the polling location. The reason why is that they were coercing and intimidating voters as well as the people that were the election judges. So in our state, it's extremely important that we protect the secrets of the ballot, because we look back during that period of time and we see what happened when people wanted to manipulate the outcome of the election. Now, what was interesting to me, I was actually at the conference in Houston that Tammy had, and I was with another state. They actually don't protect the secrecy of the ballot, and everyone's ballot is actually up for public review. In another state, I think it was North Carolina, was where they were telling me that at. And so it's interesting how state by state different laws are passed. I was really surprised because I thought every state really worked to protect the secrets of the ballot, but in that state, they currently do not. And so not every state is the same. But I would always tell you it's incredibly important we protect the secrets of the ballot, and that we want to continue to do that. So what happens now? It's important to me, and I believe all election officials, that voters know we have nothing to, oh, hang on. Where am I at now? Am I there? Okay, good. It's important to me, and I believe all election officials, that voters know we have nothing to hide from the election results of 2020. Here's what I tell folks, and I think y'all would agree. If our machines are not tabulating correctly, do you want to certify that election? No. I mean, that's why we're doing all the work that we're doing. And I tell this to folks. I was actually up in Pike County last night. Is Laura here? You here this morning? Linda told me to tell you hello. I'm supposed to give you a hug, but I can at least tell you hello. So anyway, do what now? Linda. So in the courthouse. So anyway, but there was a voter there, and they were very familiar with this case. So just so you know, I took the ire of Mr. Lindell earlier this year. He and Linda Rance, a lot of you folks know Linda Rance here in our state. They're very upset that we went to court over this issue, because it has been put out there to folks that I have sued this lady, Laura Huddleston, who's been an election judge. Just so you know, when we went to the circuit court, I called her before we did, and I said, I want you to know you've done nothing wrong. I said, however, there's a question, because we want to protect the secrecy of the ballot, but we also want to provide public information. We're going to go before a circuit court for them to help us decide what to do. But I wanted to make it clear to her she had done nothing wrong. Now, our county counsel, he was new. He did make one mistake. He used boilerplate language that said she would pay for it if we won. The statute does not allow that. So we did have to go and amend the filing to make sure she knew she didn't have to pay for the outcome, whichever it is, whether we win or lose. She will not have to pay anything, or any defendant, because the Sunshine Law protects the citizens in that way. However, it has been presented that I am trying to not provide the information, that I want an outcome that will keep the information from being provided to the public. And there could be absolutely nothing more false than that. The fact that we were willing to go before the court and ask the court to give us direction, that's what we're supposed to do, rather than making decisions that benefit us or are adverse to the public themselves. And so we have met with the Defendant's Counsel. Dave Rowland, anybody familiar with Dave Rowland? I know a lot of folks probably here in St. Louis are. He does a lot of election work. And the goal that we have right now is, if we can provide the information without compromising the secrets of the ballot, I'm fine doing that. But what I've told people, even though it's in electronic form, I am not going to alter a record, even if it's in the software, in order to fulfill a request. Because what happens once you begin to make those decisions as elected officials that you think you're doing in the best interest of the public? You make one decision the law does not direct you from, what happens? Everything's questioned, and then 5 years later, you make another decision based upon that decision, right? Then 10 years later, you're suddenly way over here, and the law never directed you to be in that position. So that's why we have to make sure that we are directed by the court or the legislature themselves when it comes to questions like this. And so, there's times I've made decisions that I question, and I really beat myself up over. Matter of fact, we've got legislators here. How many of you times have you made a vote, and for about 2 or 3 nights you couldn't sleep because it was like an amendment on the floor, and you're like, I didn't make the right decision? Have you been there? Exactly. There have been times I was in the legislature, and I did that. Charlie knows what I'm talking about. I have not lost any sleep over this because I want to make sure we're doing right by the law. And so if we can provide the information, we will do that. Now, the other thing we're working with our county council to do is we want to make sure it still protects each of you as well. And so we're trying to find a path where if your election software doesn't provide you the same opportunity to do that, that you can still protect that information and protect the secrets of the ballot. So we're trying to thread that needle, but we also want to make sure the public knows we have nothing to hide. I think that's extremely important when people have questions. We're not here to hide anything. We are here to protect every voter and make sure that they can cast their ballot in secret. So this is the first time I've ever given a presentation on this, so I hope it's been helpful. There may be more questions now than there are answers I provided, but are there any questions that I can answer for anyone this morning? Anything that I said that was confusing that I need to clarify? It's Friday morning, we're ready to go home, I understand. Yes, Charlie. Yeah. Yeah. And my other concern about that is they may be wrong. They may make wrong assumptions on how people voted, and you've got another problem there, is they may not line up the data correctly, but they think they have. And so those are things that we have to keep in mind. And to be honest, it may be more local elections where you find that issue, frankly, than national. Because the local elections get very intense, as we well know, get very competitive. Why didn't you vote for so-and-so, right? I mean, these types of things happen. It's not uncommon when it comes to elections. Anything else? Well, you guys have been, oh, yes. Because if you read a little bit deeper into the statutes, it more applies to the state government, but it says if you've got a record that's easily produced, you should produce it. And so that's why I think we have to go, and I do take that extra length because it's not hard for us to produce the record if someone requests it. And I think once we get in that position where we start denying request, then we have a harder time of defending why we believe that the election that was certified was accurate. So that's why we went down this path. Because again, the moment you roadblock somebody, what do they say? I knew it, you're hiding something, right? I got nothing to hide. And as I told them, if I ever certify a wrong election outcome, I don't know what I would do. I would feel awful. I know that the verification board would feel awful. We don't want to ever put ourselves in that position. So it's much better to be out there, to be open and be transparent. I know we've had to retain our ballots from the 2020 election longer than we wanted, But my hope, my prayer is that this will continue to give voters confidence, those who are reasonable and understand that we are doing the best job we can on their behalf and that we have nothing to hide. Anything else? Yes. We like the revenue, what can I say? So, anything else? All right, well, thank you all. You've been great this morning. It's been good to be here.
I can get this microphone off here. All right. Okay, how about 792-719? All right, here we go, right here. Seven or 792-765. Yay! 792-877. Yep, let's keep grabbing. 792-715. Woohoo! 792-752. 752? Seven nine two 704. 704. Over here in the corner. Okay, we're going to roll through all these. So now we have 792-692. 692, right over here. All right. 792-686. 686. No? All right. 792-678. No? How about 822? All right. What do we got left here? All right. 742. 742. All right. And 687. How about a 684? 684? 839? Do we have an 839? Psych. All right. 701. 701. Right there. 794. There we go. Okay, what do we got left here? Oh, a few of those. All right, we got 690. Yay. How about a 819? 819, okay, great. All right, this is our, oh, we still have more. How about a 766? No? Oh, right here. Jane. 824. 824. 824. No. And that's 2 or 3 of these left. 747. All right. 792. 792. No. 803. 803. No. 778. Is that it, Brian? All right. Thanks, everybody. You gonna do Tammy now? You're gonna introduce Tammy now? Here, I'm just gonna do this.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Well, I think we're at our last presentation of the day. So with that being said, I would like to introduce from the Election Center, Ms. Tammy Patrick and Joseph Gloria.
Great, thank you so much. I was looking at the agenda, I was like, oh man, following the awards, that's hard. Everybody's gonna get up and leave. So I appreciate you staying. You pop open those bottles of wine, maybe, no? Okay. So it's great to see you all. And my colleague Joe Gloria is in the back, who stand up and wave. Some of you might know Joe from his time in Clark County. I realize that I'm between you and probably a drive home or maybe a good lunch in town before you drive home. So what I want to do today is really quickly kind of go over a little bit of background about what the Election Center is. I promise this is not going to be a sales pitch or a timeshare type presentation, but I want to give you a little bit of background. How many of you have ever heard of Election Center or the National Association of Election Officials? Okay. How many of you are members? How many of you are CIRA certified? Woohoo! How many of you have no idea what I'm talking about? It's okay. It's quite all right. How many of you were members in the past, but you haven't gone for a while? Okay. We want those of you who aren't familiar with the organization or who haven't been to our conferences for a while, we want your attention. We want to bring you back. So I want to talk a little bit about the background, the membership in some of our committees, the types of convenings we have, trainings that are offered, some of our state-based work, and you'll recognize a few people in some of our pictures, and then a little bit briefly about some of the trends that we're seeing at our various convenings around the country. Trends in election administration, trends in voting. There's a lot of changes that are happening around the country. I'm going to show you a little bit about what it looks like is happening here in Missouri, or Missouri. I knew Wendy Norrin long enough to know that I'm supposed to say Missouri or Missouri because I know my place. And then a little bit about legislation, what's happening across the country, because sometimes that'll inform what might pop up here. And then a few resources, and then we'll wrap it all up and head out. So really quickly, Election Center has been around for a number of decades. We're going to show a brief video that shows you our offices in Katy, Texas, and some of our staff.
My first interaction with the Election Center, I had the pleasure of actually meeting Tammy, and it was the first experience that I had had with such a large group where we were all speaking the same language. But the networking and having access to people from all over the country was what made it a really awesome experience for me. There's so much going on in elections right now, it's absolutely critical that somebody take the lead. And there's nobody who's in a better position than the Election Center. They've been known throughout my whole career, which dates back to 1991, as the resource for election officials and the trusted group to get good information out to election officials. And so it's critical now for us to take a leadership role in providing that training and leadership in the industry.
I've been a member of Election Center for almost 20 years. 2023 will be my 20-year anniversary. And I can look back at all the relationships I've forged over the years, and I can remember who I met in Tampa, who did I meet in Cleveland, who was on a committee with me. And it's exactly what Joe said. These relationships are critical, not only in improving how we serve our voters, but gaining efficiencies and resources and understanding that help us be better administrators for all of the stakeholders that we serve. Not only is this a new role for myself and for Joe, it's a new role for the organization. So one of the things I'm the most excited about is to hear from members about what they want from us. What do they want from their National Association of Election Officials? How do they want that information? How do they want to interact with members from all across the country?
I want to keep the energy moving. There's a lot of attention now on elections, not all of it positive. But that positive energy that's there with people who really want to get involved and provide assistance in whatever form really needs to be taken advantage of. And so now is the time. There's a lot of folks who are willing to provide resources. We want to make sure that we're taking advantage of that with this organization and using those resources to benefit as large a group in the election industry within the United States as possible.
There are going to be some real challenges forging the next couple of years in the profession. And we know there are going to be a lot of new people coming into the field. There are a lot of people retiring for a wide variety of reasons. And we need to make sure that we're well positioned to serve not only our veteran officials that are looking for what's new, what they can use in their offices to improve the services they're providing, but we also need to make sure that we don't leave behind all of those who have a very short runway and a lot of information they need to learn and learn quickly before the next election cycle hits us. So time is valuable, and it's one resource that we can't necessarily get back. So we want to make sure that when we have you, when we have your time, that it's being used to its utmost potential, and that when you leave an election center event, you know you have action items to take back to your office, to take back to your state association, to take back to your state offices, to share, so that we can make sure that all across the country, everyone has the best information that we can possibly provide them in how to serve their voters and run their elections with the utmost integrity, accountability, and access. All right. So that's those are our offices in Katy, Texas. We brought along some materials here at the front, some checklists, because of course in elections, trying to advance it here, we love our checklists. There we go. So again, our trainings, our convenings bring together election officials from all around the country. Not only that, but Election Center, what we try and do is elevate the voices of election officials, whether it's in the press, in the state legislatures, in the halls of Congress. And it's all supported by our staff in Katy, Texas, and our board of directors. Our board of directors are comprised almost exclusively of election officials, past and present, and then some of our professors at Auburn University, which is where our CIRA program resides. Additionally, how many of you start your day with election line every morning? Okay. Of those of you who read election line, how many of you go really quickly first to Missouri to see what's in the news? Okay, some people start with the top and just read down, but those people are strange. So everyone looks at your own state. How many of you have never heard of election line before? This is going to rock your world. Every morning by 6 o'clock, Monday through Friday, there is on election line, and you can sign up for an email. It pulls together all the news about election administration from all across the country. Mindy Moretti is our editor-in-chief, and this is her dog, Maisie. She's been doing it for almost 20 years, and so you can go and see what's happening in local newsrooms, what's being reported in your local news, in news around the country, and it gives you an idea of kind of what's happening. And then on Thursdays is a weekly, and that weekly is a blog that'll highlight either a new report that's come out, or a new conference that's happening, or a webinar series. And then there's a legislative update, a litigation update, and also job postings. So if you need to hire somebody, we'll post it for free on election line for you. Or if you're one of the thousands of election officials just waiting for that job in Hawaii to open up, you'll be on it. Okay, so memberships in committee, we have members in almost every state. Some of the states have more than others for a couple of reasons, and I'll touch on that in a minute. Our members are comprised of large jurisdictions and small jurisdictions, and all across the gambit. So we have a legislative committee with liaisons to Hill staff, to partners across the board, as well as to NCSL, the National Conference of State Legislators, and others. We do not, in the same way your association tries to educate and inform legislation, we will do page and line edits on federal laws, as well as helping in state legislation whenever we can. We also have a security committee. So the Department of Homeland Security has the Government Coordinating Council, and we have members that sit on that council. We also have liaisons to the Department of Homeland Security task force with DOJ and the FBI. We have a postal committee. I heard that they were here yesterday. How'd that go? Good? Everyone laughs. I love that. So I've been a representative of the Election Center to the Postal Committee for over a decade. I've been going to the Mailers Technical Advisory Committee meetings, which are super boring. They're so boring. 3 days of nothing but postal meetings. So boring. But every once in a while, there'll be a nugget that will tell us, oh, the Postal Service is going to do this, and it could impact ballots. It could impact your voter registration cards getting postmarked. It could impact different things. So it's really important that we have those relationships. And it's everywhere from, and you'll notice Adrienne Marshall, I know she was here yesterday in the bottom picture, everything from the Postmaster General on down. So that's part of the interaction that we have with Election Center. Our last committee is Program Development and Awards. Everyone loves awards. Don't you love awards? Right? Awards, the award ceremony is a way for our members to share their best practices with others. So we just had the closing of the awards period, just happened on Saturday. So in a month, we will have the award winners will be selected, and they will share their program at our August conference. And then next February, we'll have a workshop where people will be able to workshop through the different submissions. One of the things that I changed when I came on board at the organization is that I thought it was important for members to choose who goes on to the Hall of Fame, who is considered for a Lifetime Achievement Award. In the past, that was only done by the board of directors. And so we opened it up for nominations, and I will say I've received about a dozen or so, and those two will be awarded in August at the national conference. So we've also, this year, we're starting 2 new working groups. And the working groups are kind of a tentative committee to see whether or not the association wants to maintain it going forward. But we're going to do one for communications. So if you're a large jurisdiction and you have a PIO or you have comm staff, you can send them to the working group. If you're someone who, when something happens and the television camera is suddenly on you or the radio producer has their microphone in your face, you can join as well. And then we have one that I'm referring to as the tech geeks. So we have all the security stuff, but there are other innovations that are happening in your offices that you can send your staff to learn from other IT managers, other people who just have that interest, because not everyone has an IT manager. In some cases, though, you have maybe an intern or a part-time person who is really adept with different technology. So they're able to go as well. Okay, so our convenings. In January, we have the alphabet soup of elections. In Washington, D.C., every January, we have a convening. It's very much like this, where you have kind of the talking heads sharing what's happening at all the various federal agencies and different organizations. Then in February, we have a special workshop. And earlier today, we were hearing about some of the workshops in Houston, and this was in Pasadena. That's where we're going to have members presenting their best practices. And it's definitely changed from a situation like this, where everyone's sitting in classroom style, to round tables where you're interacting with each other and really trying to mix it up and give you the time and the space to talk to each other. We also always have a tour of the local elections office. So in Pasadena, we went to Los Angeles County. We had some people say they came to that conference just because going to LA County's warehouse was like Disneyland for election geeks. They have more than 6 million registered voters in their county. They provide services in 13 languages. They have more registered voters than all but 7 states, right? So as an election official, I was in Maricopa County. that Maricopa County. And it was always reassuring to go to LA and just be like, oh my God, thank God we don't have that many voters. That's crazy, the things that they have to do. But you also are able to pick up little things that are scalable. So in April now, we'll have our state trainings and state association work. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a couple more slides, and you'll recognize a few people. So you have a great infrastructure here in Missouri around your state association. It has this. For some, it's very informal. They don't really have any structure. It's just like any given year, somebody says, oh, I'll be president, and it's very, very informal. So they don't have the same kind of infrastructure to help with legislation, to help move your priorities forward. So that's what we wanted to do, is provide a space for that, and that'll be every April. Our national conference is in Orlando. We have already had to expand the room block. How many times, Joe? Twice, I think, already? 3 times already, because it's going to be very, very popular. We will have plenary sessions, breakouts, workshops. We do our awards, our graduation ceremony, and we're going to show the movie No Time to Fail. Has anyone seen the movie yet from Rhode Island? It's a great movie about election administrators on the night of the election, or during the 2020 election period. So trainings and certifications. We have, and that's when I asked if anyone was CIRA certified. That means that they're a certified election registration administrator. There are 12 classes that you take. You have 10 years to take the 12 classes. When I first started, it was taking people 10 years because they only offered 1 or 2 classes a year. But now we are offering all the classes every year online, and we also have them where they're being offered at least 1, 2, and in some cases 3 times in person in a year. So you can get certified much more quickly. If you've tried to get online and haven't been able to, tickets those classes are filling out faster than Taylor Swift tickets are sold. Sometimes the classes are filling up in less than 10 minutes. And it's part of the reason why Joe and I weren't able to join you here yesterday. We were working on expanding that capacity so we can get more people into those classes. So there's 12 different classes. Typically you have election officials from all across the country. And it's really helpful to learn how they're doing it in other places. One, because you can learn how to maybe improve your own practice. And these are very practical solutions that you can take back. And in some cases, like I mentioned about Los Angeles, you're like, oh my God, I'm so glad we don't do it that way, right? So it has a little bit of both sides of that coin. Now, the other requirement for graduation is that you have the classes and then you have to attend 2 workshops or conferences. Your state association, this urban board meeting, this would qualify for that criteria. So we now have more than 1,400 CIRA certified graduates in the country. One of the things that's interesting, you were talking about salary increases. The state of Louisiana tied it to being certified. So if you're a certified CIRA election official and you maintain your certification in Louisiana, you get a 7% salary increase. So others are like, well, And it also, one of the reasons why election officials liked that is because it justified their travel. Because sometimes it's hard, right? You want to go to a conference, you want to attend these things, but you're restricted because of the resources you have available. So if it's mandatory or if it's incentivized in your state statutes, that can help. So this year we plan to see our biggest graduating class will be close to 100, maybe even a little more. And we've also been focusing on our state-based work. So Election Center offers an REO program. And if the state of Missouri, if the association wanted to offer this program, we have 8 different classes. We take care of teaching all of it. We do the registration for you. And then the state association can decide whether or not they want to offer that. Currently, we do it in California, Texas, Idaho, are the 3 states we're currently active in, and they've been doing it for quite some time. Now, a few years ago, when I was at Democracy Fund before coming to Election Center, I started bringing together state association leaders. And you'll see some representatives here in some of the pictures that I have, to talk about how important state associations are as a way for you to get together, to meet your colleagues around the state, and learn how to improve your association, how to improve services, how do you make some more money, how do you pay for an executive director? So when we first started, there were only 2 executive directors in the entire country, and that was in Colorado and Ohio. And now that's grown, I think we're up to 6 or 7. And so these are the sorts of things that we want to do, is to help build that infrastructure in how to serve not only yourselves and your association, but your voters. So at our most recent April conference, I wanted to share a couple of the slides to give you a feeling for kind of like what we talk about. This was a presentation from the Florida supervisors around their education program that they created. It's now been almost 20 years ago. So they have an incentive when you become certified in Florida. You get a $2,000 salary increase. They have a lot of classes that they offer to their members. So this is what an established program looks like. We also heard from Weber State University in Utah. Their program just started. This was the first year. It took them about 10 years to stand it up. They offer, these are some of the classes here. They offer 10 total classes. The titles are kind of fun. The Nerd Alert one, Data Analytics. I teach that class. I didn't give it that name, but I love the name. It's like, okay, I like that. But one of the things that's important about their program is that this profession, we focus a lot on the minutia of getting the job done, right? Which is why we have all these checklists up here. Color coding things, checklists, that's the mainstay of election administration. But we also have to recognize that in this moment, you need to take time to take a breath, to satisfy the other needs in your office, making sure that people feel supported, feel secure and safe in their day-to-day process. So last year, in your association meeting, it was really exciting and fun to see everybody coming in and having things being mixed up, right? So how many of you were at that conference and had the number on your badge and you had to go sit at that color-coded table or the number table? Those are the sorts of things that we were doing at those state association meetings, is to talk about facilitation, how we can engage membership. And Commissioner Hovland did kind of a different type of a format. These are the types of things that we talk about. Now in Virginia, they did what we call an unconference. Has anyone ever been to a conference or a meeting that had no agenda? If you were to go to a conference or a meeting that had no agenda, how many would be really uncomfortable with that, right? This is what they did for part of their conference in Virginia. There was no agenda. Everyone coming there, though, you're coming with an agenda. You want to know about, okay, how are you doing ballot on demand and early voting? How are you training poll workers that are being hired in the last days of the election cycle? How are you fill in the blank? So everybody that goes to the session writes down what they want to talk about, what they want to learn, what they want to know, and then they stand up and you can see the little tags and they'll say, okay, at table B, we're going to talk about ballot on demand printing. At table F, we're going to talk about, you know, how I pay my poll workers on election day. Some places do that. Does anyone here pay their poll workers on election day? Yeah, that's a rarity, but there's people that are doing it. So those are some of the things that we're talking about at the conferences. I want to talk briefly before I wrap up on some of the trends in election administration. So in addition, and part of the reason why this training and convening is so important is that we know, and this is the urban county meeting, but I know there are a lot of new people here from smaller jurisdictions. In this country, 75% of the nation's voters are served by 8% of our election offices. And 8% of our election offices are serving 75% of the nation's voters. So when you talk about the tensions between the large jurisdiction, here we are in St. Louis, and other offices, there's some real variation there in how your offices work sometimes, the resources you have, all of the other things you do, because more than a third of our offices in this country, election offices, don't have. Now, it was mentioned before about how can you tell your story well, and these slides are from a study that was done through Democracy Fund and Reed College, and it divides it up by a number of registered voters and how many full-time employees you have. So no matter what size your office or how many voters you serve, if it's 0 to 5,000, you can look and see, okay, I know it's just me. I'm the only one. Is that what it looks like around the country? Or am I an outlier and I should be able to use this chart to say, you know what? A similar size office in other states across the country, they have 3 people to help them out. So you can leverage some of these graphics. Another piece is there was a lot of talk about FOIA. So what this chart is showing, at the top are the largest jurisdictions, in the middle are medium-sized jurisdictions, and down at the bottom are smaller jurisdictions, 5 to 10,000 or less. This is looking at workload and whether or not it's manageable, election workload. So the largest jurisdictions at the top over time have said it's pretty manageable. We've got staff, we've got the resources, we can handle it. The medium-sized ones, around 2019, 2020, it started kicking up, but they've been able to maintain it. The big impact are the smaller jurisdictions. The workload is increased dramatically, and it's not going away. And most of that is because of those FOIA requests. So this is another chart you can use to say, look, this workload is no longer what it used to be. This job is not what it used to be. And we know that 1 in 4 election officials have experienced abuse, harassment, what have you. It's almost exclusively partisan or politically based, not on what your political party is, because it's happening to political representatives of every ilk that are election officials. Doesn't matter if you're a longtime, lifelong Republican, Democrat, independent, non-party, it doesn't matter. You're still getting that same kind of pressure. So that's why we know many people have left the field, many more will be leaving before next year, and why this training and everything is so important. At one of our conferences, the one in Houston, we heard from North Carolina about the vacancies that they've seen in their state. And North Carolina is not really a swing state, it's not that close, but in some cases they've had turnover twice in the last 2 years of their election officials. But they have some solutions. So they're doing some communication channels, they're calling it a hub and a huddle. There's a variety of things that they're doing to make sure that everybody who is new stays on board and knows what's happening. We also heard from Canton Township in Michigan. Their association are doing mentorships. So it might be something you want to contemplate for all the new people coming on board, having veteran officials help them along, because it's a lot, right? It's a fire hose of information. Okay, so real quickly, some trends in voting. What we're looking at here at the top are voters who voted Tuesday, election day. On the lower left-hand side, vote by mail. Lower right-hand side, early voting. And this is 1996. I took the liberty of putting a star around where I think Missouri is. It's hard to tell because in 96, everybody was voting on Tuesday, election day. 2000, 2004, and you'll notice now there's this little snow globe at the top, because when voters are provided options in voting, this is 2008, when they have those options, they fall away from Tuesday, election day. So this is 2012, 2016, 2020. So you'll notice, I like to go back and forth. Here's 2016, and granted, y'all are just staying right there at the top of the tree, aren't you? That star at the top. While all the others are falling away, it's coming down. So there's 2020. What do you think happened in 2022 with all the conversation around voting by mail and all the pressures? We saw the trampoline effect, where it bounced back up in many places. But we also know that voters liked having those options. And so the states that allowed those voters to keep those options, that's what's happening. They're continuing to vote in those ways. So we've said for a long time, we want our elections to be fast, cheap, and accurate, but we know that you only get to pick 2. And that's the focus for a lot of legislation sometimes, is they're ignoring the fact that if you want it to be fast and cheap, it's not going to be accurate. If you want it to be cheap and accurate, it's not going to be fast. So let's talk a little bit real quickly about some of the trends in election administration that's been put out by NCSL, the National Conference of State Legislatures. And they have a great presentation. I was talking with the chairwoman. I met her in New Orleans, and I stole this from their slide deck. So they have all the maps from all over the country for all these different trends. I just wanted to show this first one about the prohibition of private funding as an example, and then talk about just some of the high-level trends. So citizenship and voting is a big thing that has come back this year across the country. Voter ID and what constitutes proper voter ID, both for in-person voting as well as voting by mail. Fine-tuning absentee voting or voting by mail, when people can apply, if there can be a permanent list. These are some additional trends there. Whether or not you can use a ballot drop box, what constitutes a ballot drop box, does it have to be videotaped, what have you. Ballot tracking for vote by mail and absentee voting, whether or not it's required and mandatory, or how it gets done, who pays for it, whether or not there's a ballot cure process. So the reason I highlight this is that these are all things that are being talked about at national conferences where legislators are going. So they're hearing and talking to other legislators. These are the sorts of things they're reading about on election line. We know auditing is still going to be a continued focus moving forward. And then there's the election official laws. So we heard about protection of election officials, protection of poll workers, making sure that if there's harassment happening, that there are in fact channels to protect you. But we also know that there are pieces of legislation that have been passed that criminalize mistakes. So if you cut and paste something improperly in some states now, that can be considered a felony. And that's crazy, right? Because we're all people. People make mistakes. So we want to make sure that the laws around election officials are there to protect you, to make sure that the information is getting done properly, but to not have it be an opportunity to attack the profession. So in wrapping up real quickly, I wanted to provide you with just 2 quick resources. I mentioned election line. Dang it, I thought I corrected the slide. It's electionmail.org. How many of you, and I know I've gotten some from Missouri, how many of you have ever put anything into electionmail.org? Yay! So what this is if you have a problem and you're trying to get it resolved locally and your local postmaster doesn't return your call, your local postmaster ignores your emails, your local postmaster says they have no idea what the solution is, you can put it into electionmail.org. The report goes directly into the United States Postal Service's resolution tracking system, and Adrian Marshall gets it, and I get it. And when I get it, I look at it and I say, okay, what is the deal with this? Is it just, this looks like a one-off thing, or is this a problem? Do any of you get your mail that goes through, and I'm going to mispronounce it, Olathe, Kansas? They had some issues at that post office. They've had it for a while. So I keep getting reports from there. So that's the thing I mentioned to Adrienne yesterday, forwarded her a report from that postal service, from that particular postal processing plant, and they're then able to divert attention and resources to remedy it. So it's a great resource for you to leverage and use for a wide variety of reasons. If you have stuff coming back that it's undeliverable as addressed, and you know it's a good address, put it into electionmail.org. If you're getting those yellow Nixie stickers and you can't read them, they're illegible, right? Put it into electionmail.org. You also, if you're still using those yellow stickers, you're going to want to look at ACS, which is Address Correction Service. You can get all that data electronically. Instead of paying someone to read the yellow sticker and key it in, you can get it as a data feed. It's called ACS, and your local election mail specialist can help you with that. And then also, we have the new journal, which is from the Institute for Election Administration Research and Practice, which is the partnership we have with Auburn University. And we have a new journal. It's out on the Election Center's website. If you have something that you're working on, maybe in tandem or collaboration with your local university or community college or someone else that you're working on a paper about some of your practices, this is a great opportunity for publication. It's free and has all sorts of great information. And then the very last thing, one of the top things that I brought today, and please take as many of these back to your office as you want, is that Election Center has for years had this code of conduct and principles of the profession. When I was an election official in Arizona, I had 2 of these framed on my office, in my office wall, because it's front and back, as a reminder of all the work that we do and how important the job is and how seriously we all take it. Because there are going to be people that are going to think that this is, you don't know what you're doing, or you have other ulterior motives. This is a way to come back to what are the ethics of our profession. Because we have to remember that without you all, we have no democracy. Without a democracy, we do not have a functioning government. Without all of the work that you put in every day, and it's not necessarily the most glamorous work, right? It used to be we toiled away in obscurity and nobody was caring about elections. They care about elections now. We just want to make sure that their motivations are accurate and that we have what you all need to do your jobs effectively. So we have an ethics committee. We're reviewing whether or not these core values in this moment, do we need to double down on some of them and maybe tweak the language on others. So with that, this is my contact information, Joe's contact information, my Twitter handle, because I'm addicted to Twitter. It's like I wish I could quit it, but I can't. So I do try and put up flower pictures every day just for a sanity check. So with that, I know that I am the last speaker. You all have been here for a couple days. I appreciate you staying and letting me share with you kind of the new vision for Election Center. Because we really are hoping to be more responsive to members and reflective of what members want. So with that, any questions? Everyone's like, no questions. Nope, we want to go. We want to go. We're ready to leave. So thank you again. I hope we'll see some of you in August at our national conference, and safe travels. Thank you.
Just wanted to say thank you to everybody who came to the conference. We appreciate your support, and hopefully you all had a good time and got lots of information. Your certificates are at the registration table where you first came in and got your goodie bags and registered. Everyone will have a certificate to pick up on the way out. Thank you.
Thank you.